Welcome, this is Andy Bennett of Great Plains Gravel, and today we're going to review the Gravity Zilla. This particular bike is my wife's primary gravel bike. It's advertised as a monster cross bike, which I'm not sure is totally accurate, but it's a drop bar, non-suspension bike. It can fit larger tires, mountain bike size tires, has pretty relaxed geometry, and a lot of people look at it and its frame type does remind you of a drop bar mountain bike. This is a bike from Bikes Direct that we bought about 3 years ago and have put probably about 3,000 miles on total across both my wife and myself. So we have a pretty good handle on the advantages and disadvantages of this bike. And so we'd like to share some information in case it will help one of you down the road. When we look at the frame of the Gravity Zilla, it is a mountain bike style frame. It reminds me a lot of some of the Fuji mountain bikes from a few years ago. It's not a particularly attractive frame to most people. I don't find it particularly attractive either. But it's functional. It is aluminum. This particular bike is a 43 centimeter, which is the smallest frame size. That works out for my wife, who's 5'2", is a very nice, relaxed fit bike. The seat's quite a bit lower than the bars. I actually ride this bike and like it. When it's set up for me, the seat's height is about even or a little higher than the bars. It's pretty aggressive. But I do like to ride bikes that are a little bit smaller than most people would suggest for me. So it works for me. It may not work for you. The front fork is a straight blade fork, chromoly steel, 1.125 inch steer tube. It can be replaced with a suspension fork, or that's what Bikes Direct said when we bought it. I've never found the need to try that. It's also kind of an unattractive looking item. It's pretty generic, but it's been very functional. When we look at the group set on the bike, it's a Shimano Sora 3x9, so it's a 48, 38, 28 chain rings up front with a Sora front derailleur. In the back, it has a Shimano Dior rear derailleur, 9-speed, 11 to 34 SRAM cassette. That gives this bike an excellent gear range, so you're in good shape as a beginner with a wide range of gears, particularly in a hilly area. Probably a better alternative than some of the other entry-level bikes that have something like a compact road double as the group set. Crankset on the bike is True Active branded, both the crank and the bottom bracket. It's an inexpensive crankset, but it's been very functional. We've had no issues at all with it, and I do appreciate the fact that it is a sealed bearing bottom bracket, which is unusual in the price range of this bike. There isn't anything particularly notable about the cockpit of the bike. It does have a threadless stem. We have replaced the stem with a little higher angle stem for better fit for my wife. The one that came on the bike was perfectly functional. It has basically generic, unbranded 31.8 millimeter road bars, 400 millimeter wide on this size of the bike. Stock, the bike came with Tektro Lyra cable actuated disc brakes. I was never very satisfied with them. They didn't have great feel. They took what seemed like an excessive amount of force when you were braking from the hoods, and were pretty difficult to keep adjusted where you didn't end up with any brake rub at all. I ended up replacing these with TRP Spire brakes. I had a similar set on one of my other gravel bikes, and they have made a big difference for the braking of this bike. The Lyras worked, they were functional, but I'm much more satisfied with the bike. My wife's much more satisfied with the bike with an upgrade on the brakes. As you'd expect for a low-cost bike, the wheels aren't anything particularly special. They have aluminum Formula ball bearing hubs. The rims were unbranded as far as I could tell, aluminum, set up with Schrader valves, steel spokes, quick release on both front and back. Tires from the factory were Kenda Happy Mediums, 700 by 40 millimeter. Those cannot be set up tubeless, or at least they don't claim they can be. And they were a little bit flat prone. So after about 1,500 miles, we replaced them with Panteracer Gravel Kings, 700 by 43. Set up tubeless using the old split tube method since the rims were not tubeless compatible. That has made a huge difference in the ride comfort of this bike. We're able to go to a lower tire pressure. We have a little bit bigger tire, a little bit better quality tire. That's really helped this bike a lot. One issue we have had with the wheels is we've broken 3 spokes so far on the back wheels, usually in pretty bad conditions. They were probably over-tightened from the factory. I did not check them when I put the bike together, and that's probably my fault. But they aren't the highest quality wheels, so we have had some issues in that regard. When we look at the seat post and the saddle, seat post is a 27.2 by 400 millimeter aluminum post, perfectly functional, no issues at all. Does have a good clamp. Saddle is from the factory was a WTB Speed V Sport saddle that my wife did not find as particularly comfortable. Looked like a good quality saddle, just didn't work for her. So we replaced the saddle with an aftermarket saddle that's more suitable for her riding style and comfort. The fit and finish of the bike out of the box was good. Paint looked fine. The assembly was generally good. The wheel bearings were a little bit tight and needed to be adjusted. Obviously, the brakes and the derailleurs needed some adjustment, as you'd expect from a bike straight out of a box. Not any major issues there. Over time, though, the paint quality has turned out to be not great as far as how it is worn. We've got numerous small chips, some of them where you'd expect to find chips on a gravel bike, the down tube, the seat stays. Since the bike does not have a clutch derailleur, you get some chain slap on one side that has caused some chipping. But there's also been chipping in locations like the brake bridge and other areas on top of the brake bridge where you don't get gravel strikes or anything, and there has been some chipping. Now, it's an aluminum bike. It's not going to rust, but there are some spots of bare metal there. It's also worn pretty considerably where we've had bags, handlebar bags on the top tube and some other locations. Now, I expect to see wear there. If we really didn't want to, we'd use protectors, which we didn't. But the wear has been a little more excessive than I would expect. I think the paint's a little bit thin, perhaps not the absolute best quality. Over the course of 2.5 years, we've put about 3,000 miles on the bike and have some impressions of ride quality and other factors of the bike. The most prominent impression to me is one of overall stability. The bike is not super quick handling, but it always feels very stable, both at low and high speeds. It descends extremely well on even the roughest gravel surfaces, loose gravel, all those kind of things. It still feels quite stable. The bike is relatively stiff and can feel a little jittery on washboards and smaller rough surfaces. When we upgraded to larger tires and went tubeless so we could go for lower tire pressure, that helped a lot. But it is an aluminum frame bike, and it does have kind of that stiff feel you get out of many of those bikes. It doesn't feel like it accelerates particularly strongly. Part of that is the rider. But the weight of the bike, the fact that it does have fairly heavy wheels, both impact that. One thing that we feel is an extremely positive aspect to the bike, though, is the gearing. Having that triple up front with a 28 up front is the granny gear, as they would call it, and an 11 to 34 in back. So that combination of 28, 34 will let you go up almost any hill, and that's a big advantage over some of the beginner bikes you see that have things like compact road doubles that don't offer you nearly as much advantage when you're trying to make it up the steeper hills. So that's a positive impression we've gotten from the bike. One thing that some people have, that we've noticed that some people might have some concern with, is toe overlap. As with many small frame bikes with relatively large tires, you can get some toe overlap on this bike. It has never been a problem to us. It's only happened when you're sitting still and you let go of the bars. But that is something an observation that we thought we should share. So what are the pros and the cons of this bike? I'll start out with some of the cons. It's not the most attractive bike out there. The frame geometry is a little bit odd looking. The front fork isn't anything particularly attractive, although it's very functional. As mentioned earlier, the paint quality just isn't great. It's chipped in a number of places, both where it gets hit by gravel and other places where it isn't hit by gravel. It's rubbed pretty badly and rubbed through more than we would expect it if the paint quality was a little bit better where bags rub. That being said, it's an aluminum frame bike. It's not going to rust in those locations. And that's not a big consideration for us. But the paint quality isn't great. The wheels and brakes have also been at least an issue of minor concern. We replaced the brakes. We're much more satisfied with the braking and the overall brake feel and function with the upgraded brakes, which cost about $100. We're also more satisfied with the way the bike rides with the Panaracer Gravel Kings rather than the original Kenda Happy Mediums. On the other side of the ledger are some pretty significant positives for the bike. It's an extremely stable and reassuring bike to ride. It's comfortable on rough gravel. It's comfortable on rough descents, low speed, high speed. It's not a super quick handling bike. It has excellent gear range, which I think is a huge advantage for gravel and for beginners particularly, to have low gearing that will allow them to ride up almost any hill. There's nothing more discouraging for a beginning rider than having to get off and walk. One of the biggest advantages though with this bike is the price. When we bought it, it was on special closeout deal at bikesdirect.com for $299. When you just look at the parts on the bike, that is a pretty tremendous deal. At the last time I checked, it still showed up when you searched for Gravity Zilla on Google on the Bikes Direct website as a closeout deal for $299. If you can deal with the fact it's not the most attractive bike and that you might consider spending a little bit of money upgrading brakes and tires over time, it's still an extremely good value for the money and a bike that we've been very satisfied with. I hope this video has been useful to you. If it has, please hit the like button. And if you're interested in more content about bike reviews, gravel riding in the Mid-South area, and other bike related topics, please subscribe for more content as it's available. Thank you.